Yet it would take police another 6 years to capture Chikatilo.
A lot of the factors that caused the demise of the Soviet Union were also at work in the Chikatilo case and enabled him to kill as long as he did and as many people as he did without being caught.
Finally, on November 20th, 1990, after a 12-year killing spree and 52 victims, Andrei Chikatilo was arrested. Dr. Bukanovsky's profile would prove chillingly accurate.
In his confessions, he says he enjoyed their cries, he enjoyed the blood, and he enjoyed their pain. Well, he's obviously a sexual sadist.
What the serial murderer learns with the act of his first murder is that he can be in control. Because until this time, they've basically been the scattered pieces of an individual that has never made them feel that they are in charge.
The most serious motivating force for a lot of people, if not all people, is sex. The desire to procreate, the desire to be a sexual being. And in his case, it was just a totally frustrated, humiliating failure that he struggled with all of his life.
Spring 1992. Andrei Chikatilo, 56-year-old grandfather and loyal party member, stood accused of a string of gruesome and brutal murders. The Soviet Union had collapsed, becoming the Commonwealth of Independent States. Chikatilo's trial promised to be the first great spectacle of the post-Soviet era. The Russian people reacted with grim fascination.
Once Chikatilo's case became more or less public knowledge, the local people were hideously aware that a serial killer was in their midst, and nothing spreads faster in Russia than rumor.
And soon, Chikatilo would be given a nickname befitting his murderous deeds: the Butcher of Rostov. On the morning of April 14th, 1992, in the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, citizens flooded the steps of the House of Justice, anxious for a glimpse of the accused killer, Andrei Chikatilo. For months, newspaper headlines had branded him the Red Ripper, or the Butcher of Rostov. Chikatilo was dressed in a souvenir Olympic sports shirt provided by the court. His head had been shaved, a standard procedure to guard against lice. As proceedings began, the setting resembled a circus more than a murder trial.
He was in a large iron cage in the courtroom. The cage was to protect him from the rage of the parents of the victims.
He was never able to sit at a table and converse with his lawyer the way a Western defendant would have been. It was a bizarre scene. In the public seating, you had a number of family members of victims who were quite vehement in their desire to see him executed. And if they had had the option of seeing him executed by having wolves tear him apart, they would have voted for that.
The victim's parents' reaction was understandably strong. When he was put in his cage, people rushed towards it and shouted, "Give him to us." But how else would you expect the parents who lost their children to behave?
On the opposite end of the courtroom, Justice Leonid Akupjanov presided, flanked by ordinary citizens, the Russian equivalent of the Western jury. The judge read the list of charges. The volume of evidence filled 222 casebooks. The story they told was grim and horrifying in its details. The victims' ages varied from 9 years old to 45. They were both male and female.
The ultimate point of the sexual act is to create life. Chikatilo's idea of it was that it should climax in death, so he was Mr. Anti-Sex, Mr. Anti-Life.
It took 2 days for the judge to read through his list of indictments. On April 16th, the defendant was allowed an opportunity to address the court. Families of Chikatilo's victims screamed insults. Some fainted. In a rambling 2-hour statement, Chikatilo described himself as a man robbed of his genitals. Born impotent, Chikatilo claimed to be cursed by a lifetime of sexual frustration that had eventually driven him to murder. He asserted that he had never planned to kill, but that he had been seized with shaking and shivering and had lost control.
He seemed at various times intent on proving that he was crazy. At some points that I witnessed, he jumped up and started shouting at the judge and then dropped his pants and exposed himself. At other times, he started cursing and screaming.